So, welcome everybody. My name is, if you haven't attended one of my webinars before, my name is David King, and I'm going to share with you a very on-trend topic. I'm sure it's a words that you've heard regularly, and hopefully read many articles and have your own viewpoints on this topic. Very relevant, as I said, managing a remote and hybrid workforce. And today's session is really just to highlight some concepts and also to highlight some learnings, as I'm sure most of you who have experienced the new world of work have realized that it's easier said than done to manage somebody who is not in the same room as you. And that leads us into a whole discussion around, just making sure my screen is sharing, there we go. It takes us on a whole discussion around a new way of leading, or is there core leadership principles that we can evolve into remote or hybrid workforce. And this is really some of the topics that I want to discuss with you today. First of all, I've got two questions, and this is really going to guide us and give me some insights into where you're at personally as an employer or an employee. And the first question, I want you to please pop in the chat box the corresponding number. So the question is your thoughts on remote or hybrid working. Put number 1 in the chat if you think it's the best thing ever. Number 2, if you're still undecided, you're still a little confused, unsure, uncertain. In other words, the jury is still out. Or number 3 is, this is ridiculous. Can we all just get back to the bloody office already and get back to normality? So I'd love you to just pop in 1, 2, or 3 into the chat function if you've got access. Put it in the. You can use a Q&A or the chats. I've got a 1, 2 ones, a 2, and a 1, and a 1. Okay, so you all can access through Q&A. Perfect. I'm happy to do that. The chat box, we can't access. Thank you. I've got a 1, I've got a 2, I've got a 1, I've got a 1, a 2, a 1, a 2. I'm looking for the 3. No 3s yet. Okay, so it's generally speaking in this group, we've got a combination of nice mix between I love it, best thing ever, hybrid/remote, or the jury is still out. So maybe still unsure about what the future is going to hold or where it's going to take us. And I think it's important to just clarify when I refer to remote or hybrid. That's a good start. Context. So remote is that you're working from home. So you're fully remote, or you no longer come into an office space, that you are based at home. And hybrid is that it's a combination, and that will vary. So sometimes there's more flexibility. So sometimes you may have to be in the office, and you've been negotiated a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home. So it's a combination of working from home and being in the office space. So the next question is your current situation personally. So all of you who are attending today, are you working from home full time? Do you have a hybrid agreement with your employer or your employees, or are you sitting at your office desk as we speak full time? So once again, pop into the Q&A, 1, 2, or 3. Right, so I've got lots of 1s, 2s, 3s, 2s, 3s, lots of 3s, lots of 2s. lots of threes, another one and two, and a two. Okay, so definitely we lean towards 2 and 3. Very few of you are completely working from home. It's a combination of either I've gone back to normality and I'm sitting in my office, or I have some form of flexibility within my role. And that just really helps me to identify where we're going to go with our conversation, and maybe also some of the questions, because I'm definitely leaving some time for us at the end just to allow you to ask questions, because there are many questions that people want to ask in the space, and in particular want to find out what other people are doing. Right, so thank you very much for participating. Right, so the research and the feedback to date around this concept is growing phenomenally. So, as you know, it was definitely triggered by COVID. There were very few organizations that allowed flexibility or allowed a hybrid approach to working. It was primarily globally, and in particular South Africa too. You worked from the office, full stop. COVID hit us, and the rest is history, as you know. So it became very messy instantly. Roles that we assumed before COVID would never be able to work from home, managed to work from home. And I'm sure to this day, you still experience many people in the call center environment who are still working from home. And that probably was one of the biggest jumps, because I have had some experience in the call center space. And prior to COVID, it was absolute no-go. And COVID hit us, and we had call center agents climbing onto taxis with their desktops and working from home. So all very interesting, but how do we make sense of it all? And what, in other words, is the best option? Because that's often the question I get asked. So which should we do? Should we go back to normality? Should we allow flexibility? Or should we just shut shop and shut the office space and let everybody work from home? And I'm not going to share that answer with you. I'm joking. We will unpack the different questions, I think, that you should ask yourself, because I think it's very different from industry to industry, or even from role to role. So my first slide here is trust. So the learnings that have come out of this topic is around a couple of concepts. The first one is trust. A lot of the reasons for not wanting employees to work from home is that employers don't trust their employees, which is actually not a healthy approach to the people that work for you, because we should be trusting anybody that works in our organization. So that's the first question, I think, personally, to ask yourself if you are overseeing a team or overseeing an organization, is the trust component. And if, in most cases, if you're not trusting others, you need to do a little bit of self-reflection, first of all, as to why you cannot trust your employees. That's very problematic. So hence I say self-reflection is the first step, because perhaps it's you that needs to do some work on trust rather than your associates. In reality, we are going to have individuals, whether they're sitting in front of you at a desk or they're working from home, who are not going to play ball, who are not going to do as what is expected of them. So whether it's in the office or at home is irrelevant. It's about how do you manage or ensure that they complete their task. So if someone is completing a task, then you know they're doing what they're supposed to do. If they are not, then you need to intervene and investigate. So important word, important concept. As you know, it's a basis of every relationship, whether it's in your personal life or in your work life. If you can't trust a family member, your nearest or dearest, or a colleague or a line manager, it's going to cause problems. That relationship is going to potentially be unhealthy. The second concept to take into account when exploring how do we manage teams remotely or workforce remotely is listening. So we do a lot of talking, however, we're not so good at listening. So best practice to date around organizations that have tackled remote working or hybrid working is asking employees what they would like. Whoa, how about that? Asking me, David, what would I like to do? Would I like to work from home? Would I like to work from the office full time? Or would I like some variety and flexibility? So to date, this has clearly highlighted the differentials between organizations that either lean towards or against working from home. But you can never get away from a relationship, and the relationship is talking to the people that report into you or to your teams and finding out their situations, because everybody's situation is different and you can't treat people the same. We need to give people what they need, and that feeds into the bigger story around diversity and inclusion. It's not about fairness or treating people the same. It's giving people access to what they need. And that's why in some cases you're going to have to look at roles and positions, and even people in the same role might need to be treated differently. Don't forget basic human principles about being human, and linked to the previous slide is having a conversation. So don't see it as problematic, tackle it. You need to find out the need of each and every employee and how they see or even understand what remote working means or flexibility means, or working from home, first of all, and then find out the unique circumstances. So yes, we know that there's certain roles that we can't work from home. So if I work in a distribution center, I have to pack boxes. I can't do that virtually. I have to do that in my space. But there are many, many roles in which you have a choice. And as an organization, I think they tend to lean away from moving into the hybrid or the working from home space because they're unsure, they're uncertain. There's a lack of best practice. They want some stats, some data to back it up before we make the dive. So yes, it is messy. It is something that is growing phenomenally around the world and in South Africa. I think, as we're going to discover just now, flexibility plays a huge role in driving whether people work from home or work from an office space or the combination of it. Never forget the empathy and compassion component, and when dealing with having discussions around somebody working from home or not. Don't lose your humanity. Don't be rigid and set in your ways to the extent that you don't care about what people want. You only care what the organization needs, because your organization is made of individuals. And fortunately, we have lovely science and data around the power of leading with compassion. So by showing compassion, it also makes business sense. So your return on investment is there because people are engaged, they feel safe, they are innovative, they can open up. And if you're not allowing them safety, if you're not listening to them, if you're not showing compassion, that's where you are going to suffer from high turnover, late coming, absenteeism. Those are all clear indicators that people aren't happy in the space that they are currently in. And I love this slide because this is really what most people need to hear and see around managing a remote workforce. So if your team are in the office, out the office, some in, some out, you have to play around with it. You have to test things. You have to have a discussion around commitments that people make. So if you're going to come together as a team, how are you going to do it? Are you going to come together virtually, or are you going to insist that at least once a month we come together face to face? Test it, try it, listen, ask questions. That's how you're going to find what suits you, because I guarantee you, what suits you is not going to suit somebody else or another team. So the comparisons are odious, as we know. They are pointless. If you know your job skills, if you know what your job requirements are, if you know your team, you make it work for you. Okay. So even within organizations, I've got many clients that are allowing each team to make that decision. So some teams have decided to come back full time within an organization, and other teams, they have not been seen since COVID physically, have been seen virtually. And others are doing a negotiation around how many days in and how many days out. So as much as I'd love to give you a clear solution, there isn't one. You need to find your direction and your solution. And I use this slide often, and I've already touched on already. You have to give people what they need. You can't give everybody the same thing. As you can see on the left, you have to identify and understand each individual, and then we can apply. And at the same time, after that, we can obviously practice and play around with what the tools are. Right. So I think it's also very important for us to tackle current trends, because your trends in HR generally, because you'll see how aligned the trends are to managing remotely. So I'm not going to go into any detail, but I think it's very helpful to see what is going on globally when it comes to the future world of work and how much of it is linked to this conversation. So there we go. Number one on the list, remote work, and ultimately flexibility. Because at the heart of it, if you think about it, we as individuals are craving for this ability to be more flexible and improve our work-life blend. Notice I said blend, not balance, because it shouldn't be a balance. It's a combination. We are one person, so we shouldn't be living in two different worlds. So as I said there, it leads directly to flexibility. That's what people are seeking. And how you manage that individually is obviously very different. Very importantly, it's investing in time and attendance tracking, simply because people are working from home. So how do we tackle this time concept and working hours? And how do we make sure that people are working? And as you'll see, there's been a plethora of new apps and time and attendance programs that are trying to tackle or assist in this space. Relying on independent contractor labor, that's a huge one. Moving away from full-time work, full-time employees, to allowing people to contract, offering their skill set to more than one person. And it's beneficial to both parties, to an employer and a contractor, because you're not, as an employer, then is obviously not responsible for benefits. And a contractor then is able to potentially make far more money. Yes, they have to sort out their own benefits, but they have the flexibility and the variety to work for more than one employer at the end of the day. Expanding employee benefits, that's changing dramatically. We seem, in South Africa, we're still pretty much stuck in the traditional benefit offering. So if you join an organization, it doesn't matter who I am and what my title and what my position is, I get the same benefit offering. Where the future world of work is definitely leaning towards individual benefit offerings. So you get a suite of benefits, and then I can select my package. So there's 25 different benefits, and David, I then choose the 7 that apply to me. And my 7 will be different to somebody else's. Okay. So from an HR perspective, from an administrative perspective, there's a lot more work involved there, but that's why we have systems. That's what systems are there for, to assist us so it doesn't become a manual process, but it's definitely moving to individual needs versus group needs. My favorite one, because this is my space, improved training and development. Remote workers, attention to this is even more important around online learning versus classroom versus how do I drive my own learning, and what access do I have to different types of platforms. That's a lovely benefit to include in somebody's package, that you have free access to LinkedIn Learning, for example. So there's some very exciting stuff out there, and watch the space. Transparent leadership, especially because you're not engaging with people directly. Transparency is key. Gone are the days where we withhold information and we only pass on the right information or the most important information to who needs to know. Those of you who are part of big organizations, the grapevine is a very powerful tool for use for good or bad. If you're not transparent, that grapevine is going to eat you up. If you are transparent, that grapevine is actually going to support the message that needs to be passed down. Diversity and inclusion, absolutely. It is an exceptionally necessary and important concept that has to be threaded beautifully through every component of an organization. Organizations, this position or this role, head of watch how it's going to grow, head of diversity and inclusion, or head of belonging. It doesn't necessarily sit. Currently, it probably sits under HR. I've seen it sit under compliance in a lot of organizations. It doesn't belong anywhere but on its own. But that's another debate for another day. And then very importantly, because most of you will fall into this space, is the importance of human resources. It's time to shine. We've seen how critically the human resource expert or specialist has been during COVID. The focus was on people. And the future world of work is just urging and seeking this essential service, not a support service, essential component of any organization to support and drive the organization into the future world of work. So those are the trends. Just highlighted them briefly, and I think it's always very helpful to keep in touch, and also to align your organization or your role to see where you potentially are focusing or not focusing, and are you not even having these conversations? Then that should be a flag to say, listen, this isn't even on our radar, but this is something globally that people are talking about, and employees in particular are demanding from employers. So it's a lovely opportunity to have some conversations with the decision makers or the rest of your team. Right, so let's tackle some myths about leading remotely, and hopefully you will agree that they're all myths. The first one, and it's good to have this conversation, because often we get sometimes confused by this debate. So the first one is collaboration and innovation are better done in person. Okay, so would have always been a firm believer in that. That if we're together in the same space, naturally we're going to collaborate better and work better. Okay. However, the science, once again, the research is showing no. If you are a close-knit team that trust each other, that you're connected, that you are compassionate, that you meet regularly, there's no reason why you're going to be less collaborative or innovative than in person. Okay, so There we go. That's number one. Number two, that remote or hybrid workers are less committed to their jobs. Okay, which is nonsense. It is a different way of working. And those of you who've done it will get it. It takes discipline. It takes boundaries. It takes energy management to successfully work remotely. It also takes, you've got to look at the unique circumstances of each individual. Some people cannot work from home because they simply don't have the space or the capacity or the ability to. They also, their circumstances may be different because there may be children at home or extended families at home. So it might sound all wonderful, but it's not. It becomes highly demotivating, stressful, anxiety-inducing. And in that circumstance, people would far prefer to work back in the office or one of the shared working spaces, which is another very interesting concept that's out there. And then the third one is remote work hurts company culture. And this has been probably one of the biggest deterrents and reasons that companies have said everybody must come back. It's around quick decision making and how can you build a culture and check on people's well-being if you are working remotely. Okay, so I would have definitely been one of those that would have said, absolutely, I agree with this. But my research on this topic has clearly indicated, once again, that it's nothing to do with the company culture. It's about poor management. It's about poor leadership that results in poor company culture. So whether it's in the workplace face-to-face or if it's at home, you can definitely, and there's some wonderful examples of organizations that have the most amazing cultures, and yet they are fully remote and are not even face-to-face. So it's very much about how you run your business rather than trying to blame remote working or back in the work environment as the excuse. So those are just some 3 juicy myths that I'm sure we could debate and discuss for many, many, many hours. But I think it was good to put those out there because hopefully it's created some food for thought. And the beauty of all of these is you can back them up by research and articles. Right. So the next 2 slides are just around an interesting survey that's been put out there around managing people remotely. Don't worry too much about the percentage and the stats. It's really the language that's coming out. So those who are remote or hybrid managing effectively, it's because they are communicating frequently and well. So you're going to have to communicate more if you are managing a hybrid or remote workforce, particularly if your team are mixed, that some are in the office and some aren't. So communicate often, communicate frequently, and communicate well is one of the biggest success factors of managing remotely. Then providing emotional and social support. You all would have learned and experienced that during COVID. Such a necessary role of a leader to check on people's well-being, their mental, their physical, their circumstances in which they find themselves. So very important. The next one is maintain productivity and engagement. It's once again keeping track of people's performance, their productivity, and at the same time ensuring that they're engaged at all times. You've got to be clear about expectations. You've got to be clear about your team or your company guidelines and what you're following when it comes to data, when it comes to meeting times, when it comes to email times, because I'm sure most of you who work from home discovered that your day tended to be extended that it's far easier to just pop onto your tablet or your laptop or your phone and send out emails after hours because it's there. And in a way, people also feedback given as they feel guilty because while they were at home, they were able to cook their meals and fetch and carry the children and take the dog to the vet. So they felt, oh, then I need to then put in some extra hours, even though their work was complete. So it's a very interesting example, that one. Technology. Okay, technology has either supported or hindered remote working, as you will well know. The biggest one being connectivity and data, and then also tracking, and group communication. How do you share files with each other? Fortunately, there's technology that does it for us. Okay, some good examples of some organizations who've subsidized home offices. They've subsidized Wi-Fi, office furniture, etc., to especially those that have allowed people to work from home all the time. Work-life balance is something, promote work-life balance / blend is something that successful companies who are managing remotely do. This takes time, this takes effort, this takes understanding, once again, of individual people. The examples there are flexibility, support working parents, extended time off policies, and help employees manage their workload. And then the last one is ensure well-being, physical well-being, extend health benefits, ensure on-site employee safety. Another interesting one is around leave. There's been a trend where people have not been taking leave because of COVID, and also feeling guilty once again. Well, can I take leave because I'm working flexi, I'm working from home? Yes, you can take leave, and it's very important that you take leave. But the feedback and research is very interesting on this, because there's been almost a decline in leave requests, and there's also been a build-up, which HR people hate, that somebody's supposed to take their leave and they haven't taken their leave. Right. So before we hit the questions, here are some helpful tips, and I will go back to the Q&A if you've popped in any questions. Right, some helpful tips to assist us as managing people that are hybrid or working remotely. And some of them link directly back to the previous slide, to even the myths and to the trends. So the first one is maintain frequent and transparent and consistent communication. So you can see I've mentioned this, and I'm going to mention it again. Two-way, consistent, easy to navigate. We can't expect to send a mail and assume that everybody gets it and everybody understands, and then we fold our arms and say, well, I sent the mail, I've done my job, I have communicated. Or I sent the WhatsApp, I have communicated. No, you've got to follow up. You've got to check if you're not getting any response or any feedback. The second one is provide support for physical and mental health. Okay. How do you do that? Well, there are a number of options. So you're not all counselors. We're not all coaches, but we are human beings, and we can care for others. We can't fix people's problems. We can't take away their problems, but we can listen. And if you're fortunate enough to have a employee assistance program, that is fantastic, because to me, that is one of the best things that you could implement in an organization, is an employee assistance program. It shows that you care. It also gives you great insight into finding out the physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual health of your employees. It remains anonymous, but you get an idea of themes that are coming across in your organization for then you to be able to assist and to be able to implement your employees. The third one is help employees stay more productive and engaged. Okay, so it's about working together. It's about teamwork. It's about following up. It's about having shared platforms to work on, whether you're working as a team or a project team. If you're also working cross functions, which many organizations do, they're wonderful systems once again, and technology can help us tremendously in this space. The fourth one is managing the paradox of remote work-life balance or blend. Okay. And I think a lot of companies have failed to really understand this. And here's some good examples. Yeah. Provide flexibility to work throughout the day or evening when it works best for employees, rather than a traditional 8 to 6. Whoa, 8 to 6. 8 to 4, 8 to 4:30. So some people, because you're working from home, there's an agreement. If you're going to start later, then if you work better in the evening, then what's wrong with that? However, you have to take into account the other people in the organization and the team. So if I'm working at 6 o'clock at night and my cutoff time is 4 o'clock, then you can't be expecting something from me or be sending me mails at 1 o'clock in the morning, because these are the rules that you need to implement as a team or as an organization. Encourage taking time off and time blocking during the day to allow for taking care of children, for fetching children. Okay. Encourage your employees to block out their calendars for stuff that they need to do. This is very bold. This is very brave when organizations allow people to do this. Set the tone and expectations for new productivity. It's okay to get your work done over the course of a day rather than 9 to 5. Nudging is the other big on-trend word. Nudge employees to stop work at a designated log-off time, because then you're going to get the workaholics. You are going to work 24/7. So this one, there's lots of work that can be done here, and education around this. So those are just some examples I thought that would be quite helpful. And I'm sure some of you are like going, whoa, this is blowing my mind, or actually this would never happen in my organization. Well, to be a trailblazer, you have to try new things, and you have to perhaps even test things out. Pilot stuff. You get away with murder when it comes to piloting stuff. So pilot stuff and see how it works with maybe a sample group. The fifth one is don't lose sight of your strategic priorities. Okay, you've still got a business to run. You've still got a department. You've still got strategy expectations, KPIs, KPAs. And because we're working remotely, it can't go pear-shaped, or because I'm some days in the office, some days out the office. It doesn't mean that's chaos. It just means it's a different way of working. So set your sights on your priorities and make sure you're clear about it, and that your team are clear about it and know what's expected of them. Right. Good. I see somebody's got lots of questions. Good. Questions are coming now. All right. So the last, that was the last one. So there were five tips. Go back again. Maintain frequent and transparent communication with your team. Provide support for physical and mental health. Help employees stay productive and engaged. Manage the work-life blend or balance, and don't lose sight of your strategy. It doesn't change. Whether we're working at home or not working at home, you still know what you need to achieve. As long as you're achieving it, for me, it's a no-brainer. If someone's been given a task and they do it at home or do it at work, isn't that wonderful? They've done their job. That's what you're paying them for. Right. And this slide is there to remind me to tell you about experimentation, and I've already touched on it. Experiment, pilot something, test something out. It doesn't become ingrained and entrenched. It doesn't have to be the way we're doing it forever. Communicate effectively. Say, this is, we want to practice some new concepts around working from home or remote working, and we're going to pilot it for 6 months. team to pilot it with. This is what it's about. It's being open, it's being transparent, it's being real, it's not being secretive or dogmatic or stuck in the mud and refusing to budge or refusing to change. Now, this is the reality check. Okay, for those which from our original question, it doesn't seem to be a concern because none of you highlighted that it's all bloody nonsense and you must get back to the office. Remote work is definitely here to stay. It will bring new challenges and opportunities. Organizations around the world are experimenting with novel or unique management practices to manage the transition to a more distributed workforce. And there, look at the last sentence. We are still in the early days. So we don't have all the answers. We don't have complete clarity and surety. There's no one way of doing it. That's another important message. There's not one way of doing this. You need to do your own research. You need to understand everybody's role. You need to understand your organization's culture before we can commit to something. And even if you commit to it and it's not working, change it. Say we've tried, we tested, and actually we prefer to try another option. Right. So now's your chance to fire those questions. So I don't know if you have access to unmuting, because I would love for you to be able to unmute and speak to me, but that may not be the case. So if you want to type a question into the Q&A, then I can tackle it. And if I don't get through all the questions, then so you don't. Thanks, Nicole. If you don't get all the questions, I will reply to all of you. I will get this listing and respond to your questions. So if you want to pop in a question, non-tobacco, you've got lots of questions. So pop it in the Q&A, and I will try my best to answer. So hopefully I gave you a good grounding and a good understanding around remote working, and how to manage a team that is remote or hybrid. I'll wait patiently for your questions. I'm going to just scroll through and see if I can see any further up. Okay. Calling all questions once again. And questions are always very helpful because you may think you're the only one who is thinking about this topic or this question, and you'll be surprised how many other people. That's a good question, Monto. I don't know. I think you are. If you can type your question, I can then answer it. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, here we go. First question is, what about sick leave? Whoa. And work from home? Good question. The same applies. if we're sick, we shouldn't be working, whether we are at home or whether we are in the office. And this question often comes up. There seems to be a tendency, which actually benefits organizations, where when you're sick and you're working from home, you carry on working because you put the laptop in the bed and you work, even though you're sick. Okay, so if you're sick, you're sick, and the same applies. You submit your on the system, or if it's paper based, your email. I'm sick, and I'm not working today. Okay, hopefully that answers your question, but it is as simple as that. Melinda, we are in the manufacturing industry, which is a blend between office and manual workers. It's always been a debate about if it's fair to let some people work from home while others have to work in the office. Yeah, I came from a similar environment, Mr. Price Group, where the distribution center or the DC associates on the floor versus the admin staff upstairs, and they had exactly the same argument. Well, not argument, debate. And the decision was made as a distribution center. They would commit to one decision, and that decision obviously was that everybody would work from the office. Interesting one, because you don't want to create this them versus us scenario, but the research clearly says it should be role dependent, and it's how you explain it, I think, is key. So I think even in a distribution center environment, you can have those that are able to work from home. As you clearly said, in the manufacturing space, you can't work from home. That's a role that you're currently in. And hopefully, if you don't want to stay in a role like that, you need to seek another role where you can work from home, which is easier said than done, specifically because of our high unemployment. So yeah, that is a challenge. And once again, there's no clear answer around this. It's about, for me, if you were going to allow that to happen, to separate the two spaces, is to communicate that and explain why. It's not because the admin staff are potentially, or the office staff are better, is that they can still do their work, and they are working. It's not as if they're not working. But yeah, thank you for that question, and I hope that helped, even though I didn't give you the answer, because it's either or. Because I've seen different organizations tackle it. Right. Sometimes they say, I'm not well, can I work from home? Okay. See what you. So if they're working from home, they're working. There's a trust element again. So if you're picking up a vibe that potentially it's an excuse, then you have to maybe have a difficult conversation. But don't let one person ruin it for everybody else. That is key. You will always get people that will take advantage of a situation, but then it should clearly come out in their performance if they're not achieving their tasks or their jobs. Right, Nontol. In our organization, one of the reasons we have encouraged employees to return back to work was because of the impact on the culture. Yes. We fear to lose the organizational culture of teamwork, collaboration, because we have less data on successful companies that have implemented successful hybrid. Exactly. Because it's early days, most organizations tend to take the safer route because we don't know statistically. But there is very healthy, as I said, that's why I shared that with you, the myth. There is very healthy research coming out on that it's not going to impact your culture. It may be, you may have to tackle it a whole different way. You may have to relook at how you keep people connected and engaged, but it can't be used as an excuse. A lot of companies are using it as an excuse to say, oh, we can't use our culture, but actually their culture wasn't even great before. It wasn't even healthy before, and now we're using culture as our excuse. So good one. Keep the research, look at the research, pull it up. But ultimately, you know your space, you know your environment better than anybody else. but don't fall into the trap of not being brave and not being bold and not being trailblazers, and then wanting to do best practice and see what everybody else is doing, because then you're not being innovative. You're waiting and you're following others. Another question. Sorry, Mark. Right. What happens if took a day's leave and they asked you to work maybe for an hour or two? Well, these questions are coming at me. Okay. So, good one. So, I think there's a conversation you need to have. You and a lot of companies, I think if it's a healthy environment, it would be right. So, even though you took the day's leave, I worked for 2 hours. So actually, one day I'm going to finish early, or one day I'm going to start late. But have the conversation, because there's no hard and fast rule around this. It's not about now breaking down your 8-hour day and working out cost perspective. It's about saying, right, so I did end up working hours on leave, which isn't actually fair. And I just want to raise that with you to say that I'm going to potentially finish early on another day or start late on another day. And I don't know your structure, your culture. In some spaces, that would be open to something like that. In others, it just might be something that no one's done before. So once again, I keep on using this word, being bold and brave. Have the conversation. Okay, because sometimes it might just happen. It's not intentional, but when we're on leave, we need to be on leave. We also need to learn there around boundaries. When somebody's trying to get you to do work and you're on leave, sometimes we fall into that trap and we want to work when we're not supposed to. Trying to please, because we're people pleasers. We're trying to please or impress somebody, and it's not going to benefit you. It's going to backfire. Can you claim the time as time off? I think I answered that question. It's unlikely per hour. This is not my area of expertise. I'd rather have that discussion with your HR person or with your organization. But it's often used as time off rather than a monetary component. So you'll get another 2 hours somewhere along the line. I will definitely share, when I share the slides, I'll also share the research articles, which I'll send on to HR Talk so they can pass them on to all of you. Right, you have raised an important values, trust and leadership. Change management is required with South African leadership. Absolutely, trust and communication are key areas where leadership fail or short of this. Thus, there's a huge role of change management in South African leadership. Yeah, it's not. As South Africans, we're very good to point fingers at ourselves, but it's a global issue. It really is about that word trust, and with almost. We need to relook at, everybody needs to relook at their leadership skills and how to lead in this future world of work. Because you may have gone through leadership interventions many, many years ago. The world has changed. It's like most things in life. We have to keep on upskilling ourselves and relearning, unlearning, as you know, the term unlearning and relearning. It doesn't matter where you sit in an organization, if you're the CEO or you're the first line supervisor. The world has changed in the last 2.5 years, and we all need to be refreshed or be introduced to new concepts, to new themes, just like this, because this really wasn't on anybody's list or radar before COVID. And now what are we doing? Now we're grappling with this. Shall we, shan't we, can we, can't we? And it's important to upskill everybody again around these concepts. Well, thank you, everybody. We've got time for one or two more questions. Not any difficult ones, please. Only joking. Check if I've missed any. Pleasure, Melinda. Right. So thank you, everybody. I enjoyed sharing my research on this topic, and as I said, I will share the slides and the research articles that will be sent on to you. And good luck to all of you, and have a lovely day.